I am this close to getting my new K-Tech LS7 put together and getting Goldie back on her feet, but I realize that while I'm in there, there are a few things I need to address. Come on. If you've ever taken on a car project, at some point you've probably felt the gravitational pull of while I'm in there. While I've got this engine out, the logic goes, I might as well replace some worn out parts, and if I'm going to replace them, I might as well upgrade them. It all starts out innocently enough, but very quickly you realize that you are headed down a rabbit hole that will inevitably bleed your wallet dry. Thankfully, there is one thing on my list that's free, and that is cleaning up my filthy engine bay. So while I scrub 17 years of grime, I'll tell you about the rest of my list. After I got my Track Attack LS7 short block from K-Tech, I realized that I still had some things to figure out. And so I started making a while I'm in there list. I combed the comments on my old videos, I asked friends for ideas, I even made a post in a Facebook group. And I felt pretty good about what I came up with until I added up the cost and realized I would be spending more than my friend Bobby just paid for a nice running and driving Mazda Miata. I had clearly taken things too far, so some restraint was in order. But where do you draw the line? Let's look at my original list and see what made the cut. First up, the Alternator. Mine has been running really hot to the point that it's discolored the hood insulation. A new factory unit runs a whopping $380, but a lot of folks recommend a MechMan billet unit, which costs an eye-watering $574. And this illustrates the danger of while I'm in there. It's easy to convince yourself to spend the money. So did I spend almost $600 on a new alternator? No. I was mentally preparing to bite the bullet on this, but my friend Trent told me about a local automotive electric shop that will rebuild your factory alternator for a very reasonable price. Let's do that for about $100. Next, we've got a trunnion upgrade for the rockers. In a pushrod motor, the rockers are activated by the pushrods, which in turn press against the valve springs to open and close the valves. The factory trunnions are known to fail and scatter needle bearings into your motor. Brian Tooley Racing offers upgraded bearings for $149. Did I decide to make the purchase? Yes. I've personally seen a factory rocker trunnion fail and spill its bearings. If you're lucky, you can find them under the valve cover, count them, and pray you get lucky and find them all. $150 is a relatively small price to pay for peace of mind. For just a bit more money at $225, DEI makes a transmission tunnel heat shield kit that prevents your center console from getting hot and roasting whatever you chose to store inside the cubby. That's where I like to keep my chocolate, so it seems like this is right up my alley. Did I go for it? No. I'll switch from chocolate bars to M&Ms and save the money. While I am willing to risk melting some chocolate, I'd prefer not to melt any bearings due to oil starvation, so there are a series of upgrades that are geared towards preventing that. First up is the AVA dry sump tank insert. The C6 Z06 has a dry sump oil tank, which is meant to prevent oil starvation by providing a reliable source for oil to be pulled from. A typical wet sump setup can suffer from oil starvation under sustained high G cornering. Unfortunately, the dry sump setup GM went with isn't regarded by experts as motorsports caliber. One theoretical failure scenario occurs if the oil in the dry sump tank aerates and rises up the sides of the tank, starving the pickup in the tank. Aviade's insert has a vent and baffling designed to prevent this from happening. But is it worth $250? For me, yes. Maybe it's because I feel guilty about killing the first motor while driving on track, but I'm willing to do a little spending to try to ensure it won't happen again. Along those lines, the early Z06s, mine is a 2007, had a small dry sump tank and a total oil capacity of 8 quarts. When the ZR1 was introduced, the Z06s also got a bigger dry sump tank, expanding the oil capacity to 10.5 quarts. Internet people speculate that this was done because the reduced capacity of the early cars could lead to, you guessed it, Oil starvation. Would I be willing to spend $384 for 2.5 quarts of additional capacity? Yes. You can send Lingenfelter your old puny tank, which is what I did, and they will weld on an appendage, which is cheaper than buying a new GM unit. And if you want to get a little crazy when it comes to avoiding oil starvation, but you don't want to spend almost $5,000 on a daily engineering dry sump kit, Improved Racing offers a solution. For $518, you can get their crank scraper, windage tray, and oil pan baffle. This setup does a better job than the factory tray of keeping oil off the crank, which reduces aeration and keeps the pickup in the oil pan from starving. But is it worth $518? I would lean towards no, but my friend Trent swears by it, and so I let While I'm in There-itis get the better of me. Improved Racing claims this will gain 5 to 10 wheel horsepower because your crank isn't forcing its way through the oil that would otherwise be sloshing around. Improved Racing also sells another item on my list, which is their oil cooler thermostat. The factory oil cooler is always running even when the car is cold, which results in your oil taking forever to get up to operating temperature and sometimes never getting up to temp if it's cold outside and you're not driving hard. But was I willing to part with $380 to buy it? No. It might be worth it down the road, but I decided I could afford to skip it for now. And on the subject of cooling, a lot of people recommend that you upgrade the factory radiator. The go-to upgrade appears to be the one offered by DeWitt's, and it costs $990. Did I buy it? No. I haven't experienced cooling issues yet, and even if I do, there are cheaper solutions I can try before spending $1,000 on a new radiator. This car is meant to be a street car that is track capable, which calls for a balanced approach, which segues perfectly into the harmonic balancer that fits on the end of the crankshaft. These are prone to wearing out, so it's a prime example of something people recommend while I'm in there. But was I willing to fork over $514 for an ATI super damper? Yes. I previously installed one of these on my C5 Z06 when my factory crank pulley fell off, so that might have influenced my decision. Torque tube bushings also have a tendency to wear out, so having the engine and most of the exhaust off the car creates an opportunity to go in and replace them. RPM Transmissions offers a $400 DIY kit. But did I go for it? No. You've got to draw the line somewhere, and even if this is probably a good idea, it would add a lot of work that's probably not necessary at this point. Another $400 item on my list is a catch can setup from Elite Engineering. I had a similar setup on my C5 Z06, and from it I learned all about the joys of crankcase ventilation and checking your catch can regularly to see how much oil is in it. Does Goldie need a catch can right now? No. I may rethink that if I show signs of too much crankcase pressure, but I'm trying to keep Goldie very streetable, and emptying a catch can isn't something most people want to deal with on a regular basis. Next up is the priciest thing on my list. My old clutch has a little over 50,000 miles and some hard driving under its belt, so it's kind of a no-brainer to replace it. But man, there are a lot of options out there for a range of budgets and applications. I'm anticipating Goldie will make right around 600 crank horsepower, so a new factory clutch would probably be fine, but after doing a lot of reading in the comments and elsewhere, I decided to go with the Monster S-Series twin disc clutch. It should be able to handle track days just fine while remaining very streetable. Being a twin disc, it is going to rattle a little bit. I chose this one because it really seems to be the most popular option out there. I paid extra to upgrade to the 20-pound billet lightweight flywheel and also got a new slave cylinder, remote clutch bleeder, and billet release bearing support for a total of $1,560. And finally, the last thing on my list is motor mounts. The factory rubber mounts are fluid filled and will eventually fail. A pair of new ones costs over $200. You can get longer lasting solid mounts, but they introduce noise and vibration. My friend Trent told me about a cool upgrade offered by a company in Oregon called Creative Steel. Their Elimivibe mounts use a billet aluminum housing and polyurethane bushings, Supposedly, they offer the best of both worlds in terms of longevity and comfort. But was I willing to pay $350 when my factory motor mounts still look okay? Yes, because they sound cool and I seem to be easily influenced by my buddy Trent, who has a lot more Corvette experience than I do. Alright, so if I've done this properly, I'm pretty sure by this point my wife Nicole has stopped paying attention, so let's add up what it all cost. If I had let my intrusive thoughts win and bought everything on this list, I would have spent a grand total of $6,591, which is frankly ridiculous when you consider that none of this was on my radar until I blew my motor. But since I did manage to exercise a little bit of restraint, my final list came in at a mere $3,827. Such a deal, and almost $1,200 less than buying a 1999 Miata. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.